Hello, my name is Lorene. 3 years ago, while I was lying in a hospital bed, unable to speak, barely alive, my sister emptied my bank accounts, forged my name, and started selling everything I'd ever worked for. She told everyone she was taking care of me, but behind the scenes, she was cashing in on my silence. What would you do if the person you trusted most treated your coma like a golden opportunity? And what if the rest of your family believed her? Would you forgive them? Would you fight back? Or would you let them bury you before you're even gone? I don't remember hitting the floor. 1 second I was reaching for a coffee mug, and the next thing I saw was a spinning ceiling and the faint outline of the refrigerator door. The rest is just noise, footsteps, voices, beeping. I remember the cold touch of the gurney. Then, nothing. When I came to, I was lying in a hospital bed under sterile white lights, a blanket pulled tight around my legs. I could hear voices down the hallway. The rhythm of machines echoed around me, keeping track of everything I couldn't control. I tried to speak, to call out, ask a question, say anything, but nothing came. My lips parted, but the words didn't follow. Just silence. Not even a whisper. I wasn't dead, but I couldn't prove I was still here. That was the scariest part. A nurse, her name tag read Jamie, noticed my eyes fluttering and smiled kindly, then leaned over to adjust my oxygen and said softly, "You're in Grant Medical, sweetie. Looks like you had a minor stroke, but you're stable now. Just need to rest, okay?" I blinked once. That was all I could manage. She kept talking like I was fully awake, which I appreciated more than she knew. "Your sister's on her way," Jamie added as she adjusted my IV. "She said she'll handle everything for now." Everything. I didn't think much of it until Velda walked in, arms full of flowers, wearing that smile she always put on when other people were watching. It was the same expression she used at Mom's funeral when reporters came. Warm, appropriate, just the right amount of sorrow. Velda was always good at putting on a face. "Oh my God!" she said with a practiced gasp, walking to my bedside like she'd sprinted here. "Lorene, you scared the hell out of us!" I blinked again. My hands wouldn't respond. My throat still locked. She leaned down, brushing my hair back like we were close. "We weren't. Don't worry about anything," she whispered, her voice low now, like it was just between us. "I've already started making a few calls. I'll make sure everything is taken care of." That phrase again. Everything. The next few hours passed in a fog. Nurses came and went, running their charts. Velda stayed, chatting with the doctors like she'd done it all before. She corrected them on details of my medical history. She answered questions about my insurance, my emergency contacts. By mid-afternoon, she was listed as my primary contact in the system. I watched it all unfold, helpless. She wasn't crying, not once. That evening, when Jamie returned, I motioned toward the phone on the wall with a slight tilt of my head. My muscles ached, but I was determined. Jamie understood. "You want to check something?" she asked. I blinked once. She helped prop up my phone on a tray table and opened my banking app. Slowly, clumsily, I tapped in my password with shaky fingers. The screen loaded. My checking account balance blinked back at me. $47.82. I blinked again. Once, twice. Refreshed the screen. Same number. I moved to savings. 0.0. I felt the pressure in my chest rise. I opened my investment portal. Two-factor authentication blocked me. I'd never set that up. My heart pounded. Not from the stroke, not from fear, from clarity. Something was very, very wrong. I looked up at Jamie, my lips trembling, unable to form the words I needed. "I'm sure it'll all make sense soon," she said, mistaking my look for confusion. She patted my hand gently. "Your sister said she's handling things. You just focus on resting." I stared at the ceiling above me. Those little squares, the acoustic tiles, suddenly became a grid, one I was trapped beneath. I waited. The next day passed. No call from my father, no text from my cousin, nothing from my neighbor, Ellen, who never missed a chance to check in. My phone showed nothing but spam calls and a single message. From Velda. Rest. We'll handle everything. That word again. It echoed in my mind like a curse. Everything. That's what she wanted. She didn't think I'd wake up. She was acting like I never would. And no one was questioning her. Not the hospital, not the family, not the bank, clearly. As if I had already disappeared, and she was just cleaning up. I wasn't gone. Not yet. I stared back up at the ceiling and let one thought burn a hole through the fog still clinging to my mind. The thought kept looping in my mind as night fell, like a slow drip from a leaky faucet. Constant, unavoidable. I wasn't gone, not yet. But I had a sinking feeling Velda was already living like I was. The next morning, a nurse came in to check my vitals. She smiled as she adjusted the monitors, then casually added, "Your sister stopped by early this morning, said she needed to go take care of a few things at home." Home. That word hit differently now. Once she left, I reached for my phone. My hands still trembled, but I managed to unlock it. No missed calls, no texts, just a string of unread notifications from Facebook. I tapped one open and nearly dropped the phone. There I was, my own face. An old picture Velda must have dug up from some Christmas dinner years ago. The kind where we sat at the same table but barely exchanged a word. In the photo, I was smiling. I remember it clearly because that smile was for a neighbor who'd told a joke, not for Velda. And now it was being used as bait. My brave little sister, still fighting. Please keep her in your prayers. We're doing everything we can to save her. Hundreds of likes, dozens of comments. People I hadn't spoken to in years were pouring in sympathy for Velda, praising her strength, calling her a saint. And at the bottom, a link. Help me save my sister. GoFundMe. She wasn't just mourning me preemptively, she was monetizing it. I opened the link. The campaign had already raised over $18,000. The description was filled with poetic phrases Velda couldn't have come up with on her own. Every dollar helps. Hospital bills are piling up. I've left work to care for her full time. What work? She hadn't held a steady job in years, but the part that got me, really got me, was at the end. Even if she doesn't wake up, I want to do right by her. Even if. That wasn't a sister hoping for my recovery. That was a woman hedging her bets. I set the phone down, trying not to shake, but the room suddenly felt smaller. Not because of the walls, but because the world outside no longer saw me as present. Velda had taken my voice, and now she was borrowing my image too. Hours passed. Another day blurred by. Still no messages from Dad? No call from Ellen down the street. Just more people commenting, tagging each other, sharing the post like it was a charity telethon. Even a few old clients from my design days left sweet notes. One even wrote, "Velda, you've always been the strong one." The strong one? She couldn't handle a grocery list without panicking, but now she was being canonized. Later that evening, a nurse named Rena entered to do the evening rounds. She was brisk but kind, told me I was making good progress and might start speech therapy soon. As she was about to leave, she said, "Your sister dropped off some flowers. She mentioned you loved daisies?" "I don't. Velda does." After Rena left, I picked up the phone again, scrolled back through the post. Then the donation list. She'd made herself the sole organizer. The account was tied directly to her personal bank. She hadn't even bothered to mask it under a foundation or separate account. I started taking screenshots, one by one. Every donation, every message, every update she made. I opened a note app and began a timeline. Not because I knew what I'd do with it yet, but because something inside me whispered, "You'll need this." By the end of the night, I had compiled almost 40 screenshots. I organized them by date, labeled the folders by topic. I didn't know if anyone would believe me later, but at least I'd have my side of the story, ready to be told. No one had called me, but that didn't mean I was alone. Velda had taken my voice, but I still had my mind. The next morning, as light leaked through the blinds and a cart clattered down the hallway, I stared at the phone beside me. Its screen was dark, still and quiet, just like the people I thought I mattered to. No new texts, no voicemails, just the digital trail Velda had been carefully curating to the rest of the world. But inside these four walls, the truth sat heavy on my chest. And my silence wasn't from weakness anymore. It was from watching them rewrite my story before I even had a chance to finish it. While I waited for the nurse to return with my breakfast tray, I opened the folder on my phone where I'd saved the screenshots. Scrolling through the photos, the fake captions, the donation amounts, the praise Velda was soaking in like bathwater, I caught sight of a name I hadn't seen in years. My ex-coworker, Janice. Her message read, "Velda, you've always been so selfless. Lorene's lucky to have you." That's when it hit me. They didn't just believe her lies. They preferred them, easier to digest, neater. My quiet strength had never been loud enough to earn applause. But Velda's drama? Her curated sadness? That was compelling. Before I could spiral any further, a knock tapped on the doorframe. Jamie, one of the daytime nurses, peeked in with the hospital's old beige landline in her hand. "Hey, Ms. Raskin. Someone named Holton. Said she used to live across from your mom's place. She asked if she could speak with you." I nodded quickly. Jamie helped press the phone to my ear. "Lorene, it's June Holton, sweetheart." Her voice hadn't changed, a warm rasp, like someone who still smoked menthols and drank sweet tea out of mason jars. "I didn't want to bother you, but I saw Velda outside your mama's house yesterday. She was with a real estate agent, had a sign and everything. Is that house not still in your name?" I couldn't answer, but I didn't need to. The silence must have said enough. "Oh, honey," June murmured. "I just thought you should know." I squeezed the receiver, my nails biting into my palm. I mumbled a soft thank you before Jamie helped me set the phone back on the table. After she left, I sat in that room, the beeping of machines fading to a dull hum behind the roar in my head. My mother's house, the house I had moved back into to care for her, bathe her, feed her, sleep in a chair beside her bed for months, while Velda sent thinking of you texts and excuses from the city. That house wasn't just real estate, it was sacrifice, it was a promise. I opened my tablet and pulled up a browser. The Wi-Fi here was slow, but it didn't take long to find it. There it was. Charming two-bedroom cottage on a quiet tree-lined street. Perfect starter home. Price to move at $285,000. Below the description was a contact email, velda.whitcomb@gmail.com. She didn't even try to hide it. I swallowed hard, not out of shock, but because the numbness I'd been clinging to was starting to burn away, replaced by something sharper. She was selling our mother's house. My house. Without a word. I took a screenshot, then another. I saved the listing and attached it to the folder where I had been collecting her lies. I opened my notes app and added a line under the timeline. 10:32 a.m. Zillow listing found. Velda's email as contact. That folder was getting thicker by the hour. I laid the tablet down and looked out the window. Down below, in the hospital's parking lot, cars came and went. People passed with coffee cups and visitors' badges, unaware that upstairs someone was being erased. Quietly, politely. I thought back to the last time Velda and I were in that house together. It was the week before Mom passed. Velda showed up for exactly 2 nights. She brought wine, told stories, laughed too loud. She barely noticed the smell of medication in the air or the sound of the oxygen machine cycling through its labored rhythm. And when she left, she kissed Mom on the cheek and whispered, "Let me know when it's over." But I stayed. When Mom stopped eating, when her hands curled up from arthritis, when she confused me with Velda, when she finally slipped away during a rainstorm, her hand in mine. I stayed. Velda wasn't there for the hard parts. She didn't earn that house. But now she was pocketing it like spare change. I didn't cry. Not this time. Instead, I picked up my phone and pressed record. I narrated the Zillow listing aloud, then added a voice note about June Holton's call. I explained the house's significance, the care I'd provided, the lies being stacked against me. I saved it all. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about record-keeping. She'd written me out of the narrative, but I was rebuilding my version, one receipt at a time. That afternoon, after the nurse brought my lunch tray and adjusted the blinds, I stayed quiet. Not because I had nothing to say, but because silence was the only power I still had. I let them all believe I was too foggy, too frail to notice anything. I wasn't. My speech hadn't returned fully yet, but my mind, sharp. Maybe sharper than before. As the machines beeped steadily beside me, I used one finger to open my email, slowly swiping through old financial messages, anything that might help me piece things together. I wasn't sure what I was looking for until I saw it. A subject line. Confirmation of new power of attorney, approved. My breath caught in my throat. I tapped it open with my trembling hand. It was from my investment firm. The attachment was a PDF, a signed document showing Velda as my legal representative, with full control over all my assets. It had my signature, my name, in my handwriting. Only I never signed it. The date? The same day I was admitted to the ICU. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding, not from fear, but clarity. I zoomed in on the signature. It looked like mine, close enough for someone who hadn't seen me sign a check in years. But I could tell. The pressure points were wrong. The slant wasn't mine. The curl on the L was too neat. She forged my name. Not just to call herself helpful, not just to play hero. Velda legally took control of everything I had while I was unconscious. This wasn't exaggeration. It wasn't a mistake. It was fraud. I didn't panic. I didn't cry. I saved the document. After dinner, which I barely touched, I asked Jamie, my nurse, if she could help me make a call from the landline. She smiled and nodded, dialing for me. I mouthed the name and the number, holding up shaky fingers. Jamie offered to stay in the room, but I shook my head. She gave me privacy and stepped out. The dial tone rang. Twice. Then a voice picked up. "Jerome Faulkner," the voice said. I closed my eyes and steadied my breath, then whispered, slow and hoarse. "It's Lorene." A pause. Then, calm but firm. "I've been waiting for this call." I told him everything I knew so far. My voice was low, broken in places, but I made sure the facts were clear. The donation page, the Zillow listing, the power of attorney. Jerome listened, didn't interrupt. When I finished, he asked me 3 questions. Specific, legal, tactical. I answered them all. Then he said, "I'll handle it from here. But Lorene, you cannot let her know you're aware of any of this. Not yet." I agreed, not because I wanted revenge, because I needed to protect what was left. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I set up a new email thread on my tablet. I labeled it Reclaim. Into it, I dropped every screenshot, every photo, every forwarded email. I set permissions so only Jerome and I could access it. I created backup copies on 2 separate drives. While the hospital lights buzzed overhead and the hallway fell silent outside my door, I crafted the beginning of something new. A quiet record, not of pain, but of proof. Velda had always been sloppy when she felt victorious. She thought she had won, that I wouldn't recover, that if I did, I'd be too disoriented to do anything about it. She was wrong. Jerome started by flagging my bank accounts and investment portfolios. He contacted the institutions directly, leveraging our long-standing power of attorney agreement, the real one, drafted years ago when I was healthy and clear-minded. The institutions responded quickly. 2 of them had already noticed unusual activity. One had denied a recent transfer request from Velda, citing signature inconsistencies. Jerome told me he was requesting documentation under subpoena, preparing a civil injunction if necessary. I didn't need to understand every step, just that the wheels were turning. Later that week, Jamie mentioned that Velda had stopped calling the nurse's station. She said she's been too busy managing things, she laughed. I smiled, but only on the inside. Velda had no idea. She thought she'd taken me out of the picture, but in reality, I was stepping behind the curtain, preparing the kind of response that doesn't make noise, but lands hard. Before I closed my eyes that night, I typed a single line into the top of the Reclaim email chain. If she takes one more step, the trap will close, and I won't be the one bleeding. Morning sunlight pushed through the slats of the blinds, painting faint lines across the foot of my bed. It had been days since I'd spoken a full sentence, and somehow that quiet gave me more power than 1,000 arguments ever could. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was loaded. Jamie came in mid-morning with my meds and a new nurse trailing behind her, a soft-spoken guy named Jasper. He was young, maybe early 30s, but carried himself like someone older, quiet, efficient, not the chatty type, which I appreciated. As he checked the monitors and made notes on his tablet, he smiled politely and said almost offhandedly, "We adjusted your resuscitation status back to full code yesterday." I blinked. Full code? I hadn't known it had been anything else. He must have noticed the shift in my expression, because he stopped writing and looked directly at me. "Your sister had previously signed a DNR form on your behalf," he said carefully. "Do not resuscitate. Said you two had talked about it. But when your neurological assessments started to improve, we reviewed everything and updated it. Just so you know." I stared at him, unmoving. She signed a DNR. Without my knowledge. Without my consent. And she told them we'd discussed it. We hadn't. Not once. I gave Jasper the smallest nod I could manage, then closed my eyes. Not from fatigue, but to steady the fire now rising in my chest. That woman had walked into this hospital, looked the staff in the eye, and told them to let me die quietly. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was survival. By early afternoon, I was able to hold the hospital tablet long enough to check my encrypted email again. I opened a new message from Jerome. His response was short but direct. Confirmed. Velda transferred the Woodland Hills duplex into her name. Escrow closed 3 days after your admission. Signature matches previous forgery. Deed recorded under her personal trust. I didn't even flinch. The duplex was a small investment property I'd bought 6 years ago. Nothing grand. A rental with 2 tenants and a modest income stream. I'd kept it under my name, paid the property taxes, and updated the insurance myself every January. She stole that too. I exhaled slowly and emailed Jerome back. "She's crossing every line she thinks I can't see. It's time to mark a boundary." An hour later, after the evening medication round, I used voice to text and dictated the message I wanted Jerome to send. "If there is one more unauthorized transaction, we escalate. No more waiting. Civil litigation. Formal proceedings. Full discovery." I didn't ask for approval. I didn't need to. That night, Jerome sent Velda a preliminary legal notice. Nothing too loud. Just a nudge. A reminder that someone was watching, and that the person she thought was gone was not. He copied me discreetly. No reply came from her end. The next morning, Jamie brought breakfast, and Jasper returned for vitals. As he took my blood pressure, he spoke softly. "I read through your updated directive," he said. "You're listed now as your own medical decision-maker again. Just wanted you to know. We cleared Velda's access yesterday." That single sentence gave me more strength than any medication. I opened my growing digital folder and added the title transfer documents Jerome had forwarded. Then I saved Jasper's statement as a note, marked with the date and time. There was no confrontation, no shouting, just methodical preparation. I wasn't building a wall, I was setting a trap, a quiet one. By late afternoon, I was able to sit up for longer stretches without needing assistance. I moved slower than I wanted, but my focus was sharper than ever. That night, with the room dim and the machines humming low, I stared at the ceiling and visualized each piece of evidence I'd gathered so far. I played Velda's moves like a chessboard, each forgery, each lie, each theft. I wasn't angry, not in the explosive way Velda probably expected. I was cold, focused. This wasn't vengeance, this was preservation. When Jamie came in to check on me before her shift ended, she leaned over and said gently, "You've been real quiet lately. I don't know if you know this, but quiet people usually come back with a roar." I smiled. Only on the inside. Because I wasn't roaring. I was listening. To everything she thought I'd miss. Every careless step. Every smug assumption. Every time she said, "Don't worry, I'll handle it." Velda didn't know it yet, but the line had already been drawn. Not in ink, not in blood, but in cold, documented precision. The next morning came quietly. The nurses moved through the halls like shadows, their shoes barely audible on the polished floor. The usual hospital murmur was comforting in its own strange way. Steady, predictable, unlike the storm brewing just outside these walls. Jerome's call came just after breakfast. Jamie had just cleared my tray when the hospital landline rang. She handed it to me with a wink and a whispered, "Same guy?" I nodded, holding the receiver with both hands. My grip steadied the second I heard his voice. "She did it again," Jerome said, not bothering with greetings. "Life insurance, your father's. She filed a beneficiary change, removed you and Daniel, listed herself as the sole recipient." My jaw clenched, but I didn't interrupt. The form was processed through a Cleveland agent. She used the hospital POA again, same forged copy. But this time, the agent flagged something. "We're following the thread now." I leaned back into the pillow, eyes fixed on the ceiling tiles. It was like watching someone walk deeper into a trap they didn't know was there. She kept going, not because she needed to, but because she couldn't help herself. Jerome continued, "We're compiling everything, but this one's going to hit harder than the last." I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. By midday, he emailed me a link, private, password protected. Surveillance footage from the investment office where Velda had handled the property transfer weeks earlier. I tapped the video open on the hospital tablet. There she was. Velda in a too-neat blazer, smiling like she owned the building. A man in a gray suit followed close behind, middle-aged, balding, carrying a leather briefcase. Jerome later identified him as a legal consultant, not a licensed attorney. Likely someone Velda found online to help her appear credible. In the video, she handed over a document folder. The receptionist scanned the paperwork and pointed to a signature line. Velda didn't hesitate. She mimicked my name, almost too perfectly, and handed it back. I watched her fake my signature without flinching. Fraud, clear as day. Not a misunderstanding, not a mix-up, fraud. I closed the tablet and set it down gently. Later that evening, after shift change, the new nurse helped me sit upright. I asked for privacy again and turned on the recorder app on my phone. I watched the surveillance footage a second time, this time narrating it for my own records. "She's walking in with intent," I said. Not nervous, not rushed. She knew exactly what she was doing. When I finished, I filed the recording into my digital folder under a new title, Final Straw. The next morning, Jerome called again. "We're ready," he said. "Time to send the paperwork." And just like that, the line was crossed. That afternoon, Velda received a hand-delivered cease and desist. Inside the envelope, a demand for full asset restitution, immediate account freezes, and notification that civil and criminal proceedings were now in motion. We didn't ask for her side. We didn't invite discussion. It was not a negotiation. It was notice. I pictured her opening the letter, standing in her kitchen, probably still wearing her worn silk robe she loved to parade during family holidays. I imagined her face falling as she read the legalese. The slow realization that she wasn't invisible anymore, that the person she thought she'd erased had returned in the most inconvenient form possible. Undeniable evidence. She didn't call, didn't text. For the first time since I'd landed in that hospital bed, Velda went quiet. I didn't celebrate. There was no victory dance, no dramatic music cue. Instead, I took the signed affidavit Jerome had faxed for my records, folded it neatly, and slid it into the drawer next to my bed. Not because I needed to hold it, because I wanted to remind myself, this wasn't about punishment. It was about truth. And for the first time in weeks, I finally felt it settling into place. The next afternoon, just as the sun began to lower behind the brick buildings outside my window, my phone buzzed. Not a call, just a text. It was from Tallis, my cousin, one of the many people who had liked and shared Velda's updates without hesitation. "Lorene, can we talk?" I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I replied with a single word. "Yes." We arranged for a call. Jamie helped connect us through the hospital's secure line later that evening. When Tallis's voice came through, it carried a nervous energy I hadn't heard since we were kids sneaking sodas behind Grandma's back. "I don't know what's true anymore," she said without preamble. I supported her because, well, she made it sound like she was all alone in this. Like she was fighting for you. I didn't respond. I let the silence do the work. That was until she said something yesterday that didn't sit right. We were talking about estate stuff, hypotheticals, and she said, "Lorene can't speak. She won't even know what's been moved around." Tallis paused. "She said that, Lorene, like it was just normal." My chest tightened, but my tone stayed even. I whispered, "Can you send me anything?" 10 minutes later, she texted over screenshots. Messages between her and Velda. Casual, careless, damning. Velda had bragged about wrapping things up before I even regained full consciousness. That night, I looped Jerome in. I told him about Tallis. He didn't hesitate. "She'll be part of the meeting." "The meeting?" I asked. "We're setting one up," he said. "Formal mediation. You'll attend via video call. I'll be there in person. We're also inviting Edwina Carr." That name made me sit up straighter. Edwina was my mother's oldest friend. The kind of woman who remembered everyone's birthday and still sent handwritten cards. She'd been at our house the week before Mom passed, when Velda showed up briefly and left early, as usual. Jerome continued. "Edwina said something you need to hear yourself." By Friday morning, we were ready. Jerome wheeled in a hospital-grade tablet and set it on the rolling table at my bedside. Tallis was already logged into the video call, seated in what looked like her home office. She gave me a tight, awkward smile, like someone sitting on both guilt and relief. Next to her was Edwina. Older now, with snow-white hair pulled into a tight bun, she still held herself like a schoolteacher who didn't tolerate nonsense. She nodded at me through the screen. Then Velda arrived. The screen shifted to a new camera angle, Jerome's office. Velda walked in wearing a navy blue suit that didn't fit her quite right. Too tight at the shoulders, too stiff at the waist. She didn't say hello. She sat down across from Jerome with that same look she always wore in public, calculated poise. "I don't see the point in this," she said as she smoothed her jacket. "I've already explained everything in writing." Jerome didn't respond. Instead, he pressed a button and began playing the file. The video flickered to life, grainy but clear. It was my mother, sitting in her old armchair, the one by the window with the frayed edges. Her voice was softer than I remembered, but her words were clear. "Velda," she began, looking directly into the camera, "this isn't your house. And the money in those accounts, it's not yours. I've already told my attorney. Everything goes to Lorene. She was the one here. She was the one who stayed." Silence fell in the room, both in Jerome's office and on the video call. Velda's jaw tightened. She looked down, then back up, lips pressed into a thin line. "I never saw that video," she said, voice clipped. Edwina leaned forward, her voice calm but firm. "You did. I handed it to you myself. You said you'd give it to the lawyer." Velda's face went pale. Jerome didn't let the silence stretch too long. He opened the folder in front of him and began laying out documents one by one. "Forged POA." He slid it forward. Falsified DNR request. Unauthorized property transfer. GoFundMe proceeds pocketed directly. Life insurance beneficiary changes using falsified documents. Each sheet of paper fell like a stone between them. Velda looked like she wanted to scream, but she didn't. She blinked rapidly, as if trying to keep her composure from shattering on camera. "I want this stopped," she hissed. "This is a setup." Jerome didn't flinch. "This is evidence." She stood suddenly, knocking her chair back. "You're all turning against me," she spat. "You have no idea what I've been through. You think I wanted this? I did what had to be done. Someone had to handle it all while she gestured toward the screen, toward me. While she couldn't. Tallis muttered, "That's not handling. That's stealing." Velda turned sharply to the screen. "You're nobody in this." "And yet," Jerome cut in, "she's here. And she has the screenshots, and the texts, and the testimony." Velda stood there, breathing hard. Then, she sat. Slowly. Quietly. Like the air had finally left the room. Jerome didn't gloat. He simply slid one last folder across the table. "This is our civil case file. You may respond through your counsel." I didn't say a word. As the call ended, I didn't look back. I touched the edge of the tablet, once, and turned it off. After the screen went black, I sat in silence, letting the stillness press around me like a weighted blanket. Not heavy, but grounding. The kind that holds you down just enough to remember you're not floating anymore. It was over, or at least the part where Velda got to speak without being challenged. She finally knew someone had been watching, listening, calculating. 2 days later, Jerome wheeled me into the arbitration center just outside downtown. It wasn't a courtroom, not exactly. No judge in robes, no jury box. Just a large, muted room with wood-paneled walls and the kind of stiff chairs that discourage anyone from staying long. I wore a charcoal sweater and slacks, not to impress, but to reclaim something. I didn't want to look like a patient. I wanted to look like a woman who'd stood up. Velda was already there, sitting beside her attorney. She didn't look at me. Her jaw clenched when I entered, but her eyes stayed locked on the table. Her lawyer adjusted his cuffs, gave me a perfunctory nod, then returned to whispering something in her ear. Jerome sat beside me, calm as ever. He opened his folder and slid a thick envelope across the polished surface toward the panel of mediators. "This is our formal claim for full asset recovery," he began, voice even. "It includes all supporting documents for restitution, plus punitive damages as outlined in Section 230 of Ohio Civil Code. No theatrics, just facts." Velda's lawyer didn't speak. He looked through the envelope with no argument, just resignation. Velda sat stone still. Not confident, not defiant. Just waiting. And then it was my turn. I didn't need Jerome to speak for me. I leaned forward, placed both hands on the table, and looked directly at the mediators. "I'm not here to ask for fairness," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried. "I'm here to take back what was already mine. My accounts, my name, my house, my voice. Hey." That room didn't echo, but it felt like it did. Later, after we wrapped, Jerome handed the panel a final document that hadn't been reviewed during probate. It was tucked deep inside a folder labeled Personal Notes, the kind of file most people skim or discard. It was a handwritten letter. My mother's handwriting, tilted, tight cursive I could spot from across the room. I didn't need to read it again. I knew every word by heart. But this time, it mattered more because others would hear it too. Jerome read it aloud. "This home is for Lorene. She is the only one who never asked for anything but gave everything. She stayed. She sacrificed. It's hers. No matter what Velda says." Velda flinched. I saw it. Her shoulders stiffened as if the words had hit her skin. But still, no apology. Just silence. We didn't linger. Jerome and I left quietly. Outside, A light breeze tugged at the hem of my coat as we crossed the parking lot. No reporters, no cameras, just sky, open and clear for the first time in a long time. That afternoon, Velda got a phone call she hadn't expected. The prosecutor's office. Apparently, when you use a forged medical directive to alter legal documents, when you reroute donated funds from a fake campaign, and when you file beneficiary changes under false pretenses, people pay attention. The civil case had triggered a criminal investigation. I didn't see her when it happened. I only heard about it later, how she collapsed in the courthouse hallway, knees buckling, mascara streaking. Not because she regretted it, but because, for the first time, she couldn't control what happened next. She called Jerome's office. He didn't answer. A month passed. The air cooled, and the leaves outside my new window shifted from golden to brittle brown. I was finally discharged, walking out of the hospital on my own legs, slower than I'd like, but steadier than anyone expected. I didn't go back to my old condo. I didn't want walls that had watched me be erased. I moved into my mother's house, legally mine, restored in title and deed. The kind of quiet that filled it wasn't empty. It was earned. There were no throw pillows arranged by Velda, no wine stains on the kitchen counter from her brief, dramatic visits. Just me. I unpacked slowly, room by room. I saved the photo for last. It was the only one Velda hadn't stolen in her sweep of personal things weeks ago. Just me and Mom on the back porch, laughing. No filter, no staging. I hung it in the hallway near the door. That evening, I opened the front window and watered the geraniums. The porch creaked under my step, something I'd been meaning to fix but hadn't. The neighborhood was quiet, just the soft sounds of leaves brushing against each other and the occasional car passing by. Then my phone buzzed. I didn't need to check the screen to know who it was. The area code gave her away. I let it ring. Then I turned the phone face down and sat on the porch, watching the last of the light settle behind the trees. The phone didn't ring again that night. The following morning, I fed my dog, Max, a beagle mix with too much bark for his size, then stepped out to grab the newspaper. The porch boards still creaked under my feet, but they sounded less like a burden now, and more like an old friend reminding me I was home. 3 years had passed since I walked out of that hospital on my own 2 feet. The scars had healed, most of them anyway. I taught watercolor twice a week from the sunroom Mom used to keep her quilting machine in. The smell of turpentine and paper filled that space now, not the hush of illness. Life had settled into a quieter rhythm. Not lonely, just quiet enough to hear myself think again. It was on a Thursday, somewhere between lesson prep and sweeping the porch, that the knock came. Soft, hesitant. 2 short taps, then a pause. I knew before I opened the door. She stood there in faded jeans and a weathered windbreaker, eyes sunken a bit deeper, shoulders slightly slouched. She looked smaller than I remembered, not physically, but in presence. Time hadn't been gentle to her, and I didn't mean the years. I meant the weight of living in a world where the lies eventually stopped working. I came to say, "I'm sorry," Velda said. No hello, no apology rehearsed. Just that. I didn't step aside. I didn't open the screen door. She didn't expect me to. "I thought you were gone," she said, brushing hair from her face like it would somehow help her words land better. And I thought I deserved it. After everything I'd been through. Her voice cracked, not with emotion, but with strain. Like she'd worn it too thin, trying to sound like someone she used to be. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I said, "And I thought you were my sister." She flinched, just slightly, but it was there. She didn't ask to come in. She didn't cry. She stood still, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. A woman who had once steamrolled over every boundary I ever set, now struggling to figure out if she was allowed to stand on my porch. "Do you hate me?" she asked quietly. I took a breath, but I didn't rush my answer. "No," I said, "and that's the hardest part." We stood there in silence, the kind that stretched, Not awkward, just real. There was nothing left to explain. No speeches, no outbursts. Just two women standing on the ashes of something they both once believed in, unsure of how to rebuild it, or whether they should. After a moment, Velda nodded. "I just needed you to know," she said, then turned and walked down the steps, her shoes barely making a sound on the gravel path. She didn't look back, and I didn't invite her to. That evening, I finished a painting I'd been working on for weeks, a soft, moody landscape of a house at dusk. The windows glowed amber. The trees around it bowed slightly, like they were offering protection. It wasn't my house, not exactly, but it carried the soul of what I'd rebuilt here. Before I cleaned my brushes, I added one final detail: a single chair on the front porch. Empty, not because someone was missing, but because there was now space for stillness, for peace. I hung the canvas above the fireplace. Max barked at the sound of a squirrel scurrying outside, then curled at my feet as I made a cup of tea and sat down on the porch. The night air was soft, not cold, the kind of evening where the crickets sang, not screamed. No legal notices, no hospital forms, no emergency contacts, just me. I'd lost a sister, but I'd found my voice. And it turned out that was the only thing I ever really needed to keep. Before I go, if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: silence doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes it's where strength begins. I spent years believing that staying quiet meant keeping the peace, that if I just gave a little more, loved a little harder, or stayed a little longer, things would balance themselves out. They didn't. People will take as much as you let them. And the ones closest to you? Sometimes they're the first in line when you falter. But that doesn't make you naive. It makes you human. And what matters is not how much they took, but how you rebuild after they're gone. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't burn bridges. I just chose me. So if you're watching this and you've ever felt invisible, dismissed, replaced, or betrayed by someone you trusted, know this: you can come back. Quietly, powerfully, on your own terms. Now let me ask you, have you ever had someone in your life cross the line and act like you'd never come back? What did you do about it? Or are you still holding your truth inside, waiting for the right moment to speak? Drop a comment below. Let me know where you're watching from, or just type 1 if this story reached a part of you that still needed to be seen. And hey, if this story meant something to you, even just a little, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. We've got more stories coming, real ones, quiet ones, the kind that stay with you long after the video ends. Thanks for sitting with me through this one. I'll see you in the next chapter.